You can start.
Hello and welcome everybody. We are broadcasting live from the Democratic Alliance Gauteng Provincial Legislature Caucus. It's my pleasant duty to introduce you to today's press conference, although we are doing this in more of the mode of a briefing rather than an actual conference. What we are doing is setting the scene for tomorrow's State of the Province address. You will be aware that in the Gauteng Provincial Legislature, there is a presentation by the Premier of Gauteng, but we as the Democratic Alliance wanted to give you our view of what needs to be done to get Gauteng back on track. So what is going to happen now is that the Leader of the Opposition in the Gauteng Provincial Legislature, Honourable Msimanga, is going to present what we call the Getting Gauteng Back on Track pack, and that is what we're going to do to set the scene for tomorrow's SOPA. And thereafter, we're going to take whatever questions there may be, but we will summarize or otherwise at the end of Solly's briefing. So Solly, over to you.
Thank you very much, Mike, and good afternoon to everybody who's out there viewing from whatever platform that you might be using. Indeed, the past year has understandably put tremendous strain on our national, provincial, and local governments across South Africa. And for that matter, around the world. It was that time last year that the coronavirus had already reached our various shores since its outbreak in Wuhan, China, some months ago. South Africa was yet to come to have our first confirmed case, but the writing was already clearly on the wall. We soon would join the international community in having to face an invisible enemy, of which we were still preparing ourselves for. Once the coronavirus has been confirmed in South Africa, the Democratic Alliance declared our support to national and provincial government to put our country into a 3-week lockdown in order to afford our public and the private healthcare industries the necessary time to prepare for inevitable storm. The 3-week lockdown also provided the opportunity for all South Africans to adjust their own personal lives to what would be termed as the new normal. However, government did not stick to their part of the deal and continuously extended the hard lockdown, causing great economic damage to the lives and the livelihoods of many South Africans. Further to this, the provincial government or the Provincial Department of Health failed to adequately prepare and equip healthcare facilities for Gauteng residents. By July last year, at the peak of the first wave, there was only one field hospital partially operating in the province. The Nasrec Field Hospital had opened without piped oxygen and proper equipment for 500 beds, with further 800 planned beds still needed to be completed. At this time, another 4 sites had been identified for field hospitals, but were nowhere near ready to receive patients. This all happened despite several proposals from the private sector to build field hospitals, but were summarily ignored by the provincial government. Like years before, fruitless and wasteful expenditure had largely featured in the 2020 financial into the 2020 financial year. Earlier this year, the DA learned with shock of the Department of Education had spent over 431 million rand in 3 months for sanitizing schools. It is alleged that hundreds of companies who were awarded this tender to sanitize schools did not even have any experience or expertise and were not part of the cleaning industry. The money for this service that was supposed to have been rendered by this company had been sometimes paid in what is now known as the sundry payments, which raise questions as to whether the money was actually spent wisely. The DA has already called for an urgent investigation into this matter. I raised the question the other day to say if we could spend 431 million rand on sanitizing schools, and not all schools, but some schools, while there's an organization that was able to build a fully fledged 1,200 capacity student facility here in Centurion, without any tenders or corrupt tenders, without delays in the delivery. Why isn't government able to do that? Why are we failing time and time again? and we'll talk to that a little bit later on. Nevertheless, just like any other government that the ANC is in charge of across the country, COVID-19 related corruption also exploded in this province of Gauteng. By the end of July 2020, about 2.2 billion rand worth of PPE tenders were awarded to about 75 companies, one of them including the Royal Baca project, which was owned by Mazikane Diko, the husband of President Ramaphosa's then spokesperson, Kusela Diko. It was alleged that the health department paid inflated prices for the PPE, which were above the National Treasury's regulated price list published in mid-April. While Diko denied his company having had contracts with the department expenditure report showed that the Royal Baca company was awarded another 447 million rand PPE contract on March the 30th, 2 days before it got another one for 78 million rand on April the 1st. This eventually led to the axing of the then Health MEC, Bandile Masuku, due to his alleged link with the Dikos and the Special Investigating Unit initially finding that Masuku failed to execute his functions in compliance with the Constitution and the Public Finance Management Act to prevent these corrupt tenders. But the tale did not end there, Mike. Despite the SIU findings, Premier Makhura was considering reinstating Masuku if the final SIU investigation cleared him of act of corruption or collusion in the PPE corruption scandal. However, the Provincial Executive Committee shortly thereafter approved Makhura's axing of Masuku, making it impossible for Makhura to reasonably ever reinstate his friend Masuku. Makhura himself had been implicated in the cloud of COVID-19 corruption. An SIU investigation and a special tribunal found that former Gauteng Health Department Chief Financial Officer Kabelo Lehloenya had received the names of companies from the Office of the Premier to appoint for the supply and delivery of the PPEs in the province of Gauteng. This only added more suspicion on how deep and coordinated the COVID-19 corruption materialized in the province last year. Further to this, we cannot forget how David Makhura encouraged MEC for Corporate Governance and Traditional Affairs, Lebogang Maile, to issue an illegal dissolution of the Tshwane Municipal Council that was blatantly in contravention of the spirit of the Constitution. It took a High Court ruling to set aside the dissolution, and while democracy was upheld, the people of Gauteng had to foot the bill for this entire fruitless and politically driven exercise. We have already tabled a motion of no confidence in David Makhura, and despite the ANC currently refusing to schedule the motion for debate and ultimately for vote, we will keep pursuing the opportunity to exercise the constitutional mechanism that is at our disposal. However, in the meantime, the residents of Gauteng need the provincial government that delivers service. We, as the DA, have formulated a few solutions for each provincial department to implement. That can also help service delivery to be more functional, considering the disastrous performance of the government during the 2020 period. We want to call this the Getting Gauteng Back on Track pack. That would help the province start getting back to some form of tangible functionality, as well as hope for the next year or two that will put South Africa in a better position. And that will ultimately mean that Gauteng is in a better place to fight COVID and move beyond COVID-19. Mike, as I said, we are going to be looking at this from province to, we're going to be looking at this from department to department. And we'll start with the Office of the Premier. We're urgently calling on the implementation of the outstanding 86% forensic investigations recommendations. Now, it had been recommended for the 2019-2020 financial year that some of the forensic investigation hadn't been finalized, and we are calling on the Premier to finalize these and to make the findings thereof very much known. We are doing this because we understand that there are corrupt activities that had been taking place, and indeed some of the SIU reports and some of the reports that the Premier's office is sitting on is actually talking to this. And in order for us to be able to address the issue of corruption, in order for us to be dealing with the rogue elements within government, we now need for this forensic investigations to be completed and for those results to be made public and for further action to be taken. From the Department of Health, we're asking for the implementation of the computerized health information system in all hospitals and clinics to cut queues and eliminate the problem of lost files. We have seen over the weekend about the chaos that had actually ensued in Steve Biko hospitals, and which is a normal thing where patients are sitting forever and ever in a day trying to ensure that they get in and get out as speedily as they possibly can. We're asking for the government to ensure that you have a computerized system that is able to then ensure that you have a speedier response to the numbers that are flowing into our government hospitals and indeed some of the clinics that we have here in the province of Gauteng. We also want to have an allocation of the budget for the COVID-19 vaccines and directly engage and ask that the government directly engage all available suppliers to get more vaccines and help build the herd immunity sooner rather than later. As you know, Gauteng is a very, very densely populated province, a very small province geographically, but has a lot of people in it. And it cannot be that the Premier sits by and continuously tell us that he's waiting to hear what national government is saying about the rollout of the vaccine. We now need to be more proactive and ensure that Gauteng spends more money on finding vaccines and engaging directly with suppliers for us to be able to then get more vaccines that we are able to roll out as speedily as we possibly can, more vaccines for the people here in Gauteng. If we're able to do that, we will be able to build our herd immunity rather quicker than having to wait for what scientists term a number of years at most for us to be able to build herd immunity. We're also asking for the implementation of the Auditor General's recommendation to ensure efficiency and effective spending without corruption. Now, the Department of Health has been known for corruption all these years, and we are calling for this to come to an end. And the only way that we can really bring an end to this is if we implement what the Auditor General has recommended. And that is to ensure that the checks and balances are already in place and not just on paper, but can actually be implemented and monitored, and consequence management becomes the order of the day where wrongdoing is done. We are also saying, as number 3 from the Department of Community Safety, we're asking that the Gauteng Traffic Police are a 24-hour service, not just a service that is there as and when, people or during the course of the day, but this needs to be a 24-hour living organization that is there to ensure that the people of Gauteng feel much more safer. We need to make sure that they are collaborating as well with the South African Police Services and the Metro Police, where we do have Metro Police in the province of Gauteng. We now need to make sure that they become part of fighting the gangs that are also ravaging throughout our townships and some of our suburbs here in Gauteng, like the Boko Haram in Tshwane and others around in Johannesburg and so on. We now need to also ensure that the work to reduce gender-based violence through the multidisciplinary approach is also implemented. We cannot talk about not in my name. We cannot talk only about gender-based violence when it's December time, when we are talking about the 15 days of observing gender-based violence or crimes against women and children abuse. But we now need to make sure that this is an everyday, all-day thing, that even government do everything that it possibly can to ensure that we are able to then drive the gender-based violence to the absolute minimum, if not eliminated at all. And Gauteng government does have an opportune moment at this point in time to integrate all the government departments that are dealing with these kind of crimes and horrific abuse of our women and children, and to ensure that we are able to then drive a campaign, a permanent campaign that will lead more to the resolution of this problem. Number 4, we're calling on the Department of Sports, Arts and Culture and Recreation to appoint a permanent CEO on the Gauteng Film Commission to avoid further internal hostilities that results in irregular decision-making that has marred the department ever since. We're calling on the cut of wasteful expenditure on unnecessary celebratory events. Again, we have heard this past week about 500,000 that had just been spent on a prayer session. And this is something that really boggles the mind when you have artists that are struggling on an ongoing basis, yet the department have decided that they are going to spend so much money on just one event, and just an online one event that shouldn't even have cost that much. By the way, the State of the Nation address didn't even cost 100,000 last week. So the question is, how do we then get to spending 500,000 on a prayer event that was held online? These are things that we are continuously going to be monitoring and asking questions thereof, but we are putting this as a way of a solution going forward. We're also asking for the implementation of the consequence management where officials are failing to meet targets or where they are found to be acting in either a corrupt manner or wasteful manner against a good practice of public service. From the Department of Education, we are asking for an immediate place of all grade 1 and 8 students who have still not been allocated a school for the 2021 academic year. I've been inundated with calls, colleagues have been inundated with calls and pleas coming from parents who are saying they still are sitting with students who have still not been placed in schools as yet. And this is something that cannot continue to happen. We now need to make sure that we afford each and every child an opportunity for a better future, and that can only happen through education. We're asking for the prioritizing of filling in of approved vacancies to avoid further classroom overcrowding. As you know, that we have to do everything that we can right now to minimize contact and to ensure that we observe social distancing. And the schools are also going to be part of this, or need to be part of that. And that will mean that we now need to make sure that the vacancies of teachers that still needs to be filled are filled as soon as we possibly can, and in order to ensure that we can use the capacity of the schools, and we can then ensure that more learners are able to be accommodated in a safe and conducive learning environment. We're asking for a better budget planning for more schools in developing areas. It doesn't help that we have one school that we open once a year and there's a big fanfare. Yet at the same time, we're having more and more learners out there in the far-flung areas of our province that are still in need of schools to be developed closer to where they find themselves staying. And we're not talking about makeshift schools. We're talking about permanent quality schools that should be built in order to give our learners a dignity of learning in a dignified and in a conducive environment. From the Department of Corporate Governance and Traditional Affairs and Human Settlement, we're asking for the formulation of a comprehensive plan to anticipate, monitor, manage, and control land invasions while balancing the rule of law with the plight of homelessness to prevent unrest. We have seen syndicates that have gone around our province deciding that they were going to land grab or they are going to invade pieces of land. What we've also realized is that some of these syndicates, it's not that, these are people who are very much without settlements. It's people who want to exploit the poor by putting up shacks and then renting some of these shacks out. So we now need to balance, the plight of homelessness and also to ensure that while we are doing that, those that want to, enrich themselves by invading pieces of land and ensuring that they sell pieces of land that they've illegally taken over, or that they are building on structures there that they ultimately then rent out, they are brought to justice. And this is the work that the Department of COGTA needs to look into and ensure that they're able to formulate a plan as soon as they possibly can. And that will also include that ensuring that we also have the red ends that should ensure that where we are supposed to prevent and remove people who have illegally occupied land, we can do that. But also balancing this with the issue and the plight of the homeless that are finding themselves out there needing spaces, to accommodate themselves. We also now need to increase the political and operational accountability to curb underspending that has ravaged this department over and over and over and over again. Every year we hear of this department failing to spend its budget. Now, it boggles the mind how we fail to spend on human settlement while there is so much demand for housing, while there is so much demand for settlement across the province. And we are asking for the department to really looking into ensuring that you have proper project management and coordination between the municipalities and the provincial government in order to speed it up and roll out and spend as much money as they possibly can to ensure that our people's lives are actually improved. We're also calling for the replacement of non-performing officials with suitable, qualified, and independent experts to ensure effective monitoring and support of governance across the province. We have, for the longest of time, been sitting with dead woods in some of the sub-departments within the department. And for us to be able to then be able to deliver, we now need to make sure that some of this dead wood are actually removed. Obviously, observing some of the HR processes and ensuring that people are given an opportunity to improve themselves. But if it has been proven that these people are incapable of delivering for the people of Gauteng, the question is, why are we then keeping them in the offices that they are occupying, earning salaries while the people's lives continue to deteriorate here in Gauteng? For the Department of Infrastructure Development and Project Management, we are asking that there should be an allowance, they should allow clients' department to procure the services of third parties and not force them to only use the services of the infrastructure department. We're asking for the building of the professional property management entity with an adequate resources and expertise to avoid further deterioration of department's property and poor management of immovable assets. This is something that the Auditor General has kept on raising time and time again. But the government is good at building, but very bad at maintaining, very bad at actually even knowing what it is that they own. And we now need to make sure that we don't just keep on building and cutting ribbons, but we are also maintaining what it is that we already own. And we are already having a database of knowing exactly what it is that we own so that we can take a better care of what is it that we own. We're also asking for the abandoning of the cadre deployment once and for all, so as to ensure that the skilled individuals are hired to ensure projects are completed on time. This has continued to be the case. In Gauteng, when we visited Ekurhuleni, we have seen houses that have been built, that have been neglected, and that some of them have been hijacked. We have seen that has happened also in Garankuwa. We have seen that happening in Mohale. And we are saying, in order for us to be able to start projects, complete them on time, on budget, and also hand them over to the beneficiaries, it is only to ensure that we have the capable people in place that will foresee all the steps throughout, from beginning to the handing over phase. And that can only happen if the most skilled individuals are actually hired to ensure that the work is done. Also, from the Department of Roads and Transport, we're asking for the filling of vacant positions, especially those in management, with skilled and fit for purpose individuals, as almost everyone is still in an acting position in this particular department. We need to have certainty in this department to ensure that people can make decisions and people can then actually roll out projects that will ensure that the roads and transport within our province are actually moving in the right direction. That will also contribute towards an economic upliftment of the people of Gauteng and indeed the people of South Africa. As you know, that when Gauteng is winning economically, South Africa gets to benefit, and that's what we now need to be looking and working towards. We're also asking for the fixing of the procurement processes to ensure the projects are no longer stalled unnecessarily. The department has been very, very notorious for planning, but never getting to really implementing, because again, unnecessary stalling and unnecessary blockages that have been the order of the day, which stall progress for the people of Gauteng, and we're asking for that to be brought to an end. From the Department of Economic Development, we're asking to ensure that the Gauteng Enterprise Propeller is effective in assisting small businesses by spending the 250 million for economic recovery and appointing senior GEP leadership. We cannot continue to talk about the enterprise propeller that is supposed to be working for people, that is not working for people, especially in a province where we have more than half of its youth unemployed and easily and every day becoming more and more unemployable. We now need to make sure that this propeller is actually geared towards servicing the people of Gauteng, more specifically more especially the youth, who are at the worst receiving end of poverty, at the worst receiving end of joblessness, at the worst receiving end of becoming more and more unemployable as we go on into the future. We're also asking for the facilitation of more trade with other countries, especially those in Africa, through the African Continental Free Trade Area. It cannot be that we're talking about getting the economy going again, yet we don't have a plan in terms of how we do invest, or how do we attract investment, or how do we get the enterprise to ensure that we're able to then attract investment into Gauteng, either from Africa or internationally as well. It is important that we get this right as we are to turn around the economic fortunes of the people of Gauteng and indeed the people of South Africa. From the Department of Finance, we're asking for the implementation of measures to consistently apply the government's supply chain management and procurement strategies that are aimed on clamping down on corruption, fruitless and wasteful and irregular expenditure, and avoid further job losses and delayed infrastructure projects. We are asking for the departments to ensure that those that are doing work for the government are paid on time, and that we are able to also hold the officials to account. Gone should be the day when officials decides that, once they are fingered in wrongdoing, whether it be maladministration or corruption, that they can decide that they will then resign and then re-emerge again in another department or in another sphere of government at some point in time. We now need to make sure that we are able to supply, or we are able to then implement the supply chain management and procurement strategies that are able to make it impossible or even further difficult for those that want to get involved in corrupt activities to be involved in corrupt activities, or even in maladministration within the departments. That should be led by the Department of Finance. We're also urging that there should be an urgent implementation of the recommendation of the SIU forensic reports to avoid further wastage of taxpayers' money. I fail to understand why David Makura has been sitting for months and months and years on some of the reports that the SIU has actually gone and done investigation and handed over to him. We're asking for the release of those particular reports, and those that are implicated to be charged and actually to be dismissed. And if criminal charges are to be laid, that those criminal charges are really followed up. From the Department of Social Development, we're asking for the cut down on the cost of distribution with food parcels by replacing them with food vouchers. Now, you find that there's a whole budget that is already put out by the department, but a big chunk of that cost is not actually going towards the beneficiaries, but it's going towards cadres who are now responsible for facilitating the distribution of these food parcels. We are asking for food vouchers to be then given to the residents or to be given to the beneficiaries, which will cut the cost of administration, and which will also ultimately lead to the recipients receiving a whole lot more than what they are currently receiving. We're asking for, for an offer for, or there should be an offer for more training for youth in various artisans where there is currently a skill shortage, and the Department of Social Development should play a critical role in that. We're also asking for to ensure that a full staff complement in monitoring and evaluation to ensure that beneficiaries get value for the money or get value for money. We're also asking for to ensure that all funded positions, such as social workers and psychologists, are urgently filled. We have had horrific stories that, there are people who are supposed to have social workers coming in to evaluate where they are in order for them to be getting grants and for them to be getting some assistance. But these are things that are not happening as quickly as they should be happening, because the positions of social workers are still to be filled and psychologists are still, to be appointed. Although we are not hopeful that all of these will be, if at all, any of them will be implemented, Any of the solutions will be mentioned during the State of the Province address tomorrow. We are hoping that at least that David Makura would listen and implement some of the things that we are proposing here. We still believe that the members of the provincial executive can take these measures and implement them to bring about some of the form of stability in their respective departments, and that the service delivery can be improved for the people of Gauteng. It is high time that the MECs shake themselves out of their lockdown hibernation and step up so that the residents of our province can finally start having a government that works for them. The people of Gauteng have been patient. The people of Gauteng has asked for a government that cares for them and government that really puts them first and deliver to them. But we cannot take their patience for granted any longer. We cannot continue to dilly-dally and play catch-up with other provinces that are moving in the right direction, or within other countries that are also moving in the right direction. Gauteng has great potential, but this potential will only remain that potential unless if we make the best use of it and make the best use of the opportunities that are lying ahead of us. And it takes government and leadership that is really for the people to get going and move the people of Gauteng and indeed move the people of South Africa going forward. And we should ensure that tomorrow when the Premier talk, these are things that he will be talking to. If not, we will then address the alternative State of the Province address, where we will unpack further what we are talking to right now and ensure that the people of Gauteng will know what the alternative is and what the opposition in Gauteng will be putting forward as the alternative to what the current government is busy with at this point in time. Thank you very much, Mike.
Yes, thank you very, very much, Solly. And we thank you for all of the information you've given us and all of the lead that you've given in terms of if the Premier has some wisdom, he should be listening to what you're saying and bring into his speech, even at the last minute, if he hasn't already decided to cover these things, because surely what you've been talking about are the things that the people of Gauteng are really feeling strongest as far as issues are concerned. I've got some good news, and that is that while you were delivering your Getting Gauteng Back on Track pack, we did get an indication via the WhatsApp line from the ANC that they will support a proposal we made last week that the motion of no confidence should be debated on the 2nd of September. So that might well come to pass. There's still the programming committee that needs to schedule this, but I would have hoped that if the ANC and the DA are both saying the 2nd of September, that's where we will be. So that is some movement that I'm grateful that we can report on. Colleagues and viewers, if you have questions, we would invite you to raise your hands and we can see you in the participants list, particularly those members of the media. Solly, I have some questions that are being relayed to me via WhatsApp and other sources. And so people that are using social media and are viewing you right now are raising questions. And the first one that I would like to ask you is, clearly, money has been lost. I mean, we've heard it through the Auditor General's reports, these annual reports that are now coming to light. They're being made public. They're starting to be debated in the committees. We will see them soon in the House. But what we know already, that there are billions involved in expenditure that is either fruitless, wasteful, irregular, and there's clear corruption. Do you think it could pay for some infrastructure development and other aspects of service delivery? And do you think this would stimulate our economy if they brought all of this stuff, the fruitless, wasteful corruption, if they brought it under control, would it be better in Gauteng?
Well, thank you very much, Michael, for that. In the last year alone, we've lost 2.2 billion rand. That's 2.2 billion rand that we know of. We're still waiting for further investigation to be conducted and concluded, and the results thereof be made known. But if you were looking at 2.2 billion rand, I can tell you right now the amount of houses that you would be able to then build, the amount of industrial revitalization programs that you can get yourself involved in that will ultimately lead to more people being employed and more businesses thriving. The 2.2 billion rand that we're talking about that could have built quite a number of hospitals, the 2.2 billion rand that had been built, that could have ensured that vacancies of the critical shortages of human skill, whether it be in the nursing fraternity, whether it be in the teaching fraternity, whether it be in the police, whether it be in the provincial traffic department, which also then can double up and assist with matters of policing as well. These are monies that could have gone a long way in ensuring that we are able to then service our people a whole lot better. Right now, we're sitting with a serious situation where the Premier said, as an example, that there's nothing that we can then do about the issue of e-tolls. He's waiting for his counterpart at national level. And he had made promises. This is the third year in a row that he has made promise that the e-tolls are nowhere, don't have any future here in Gauteng. Yet, last week, the government gazette has actually put out new tariffs, which means that the e-tolls are there. That money could have actually gone towards paying for the debt that we supposedly still owe to the investors, which would have meant that we don't need to then convert and turn, the residents of Gauteng into criminals, those that are law abiding into criminals who have said and continue to say that they're not going to participate in paying, for an unjust and unwanted additional tax in a form of e-tolls. So that money could have actually gone a long way in paying for some of the debt that, now we are sitting with, and the people of Gauteng are still, are to be paying a whole lot more, for services and for improving their own lives going forward. So that money, Mike, indeed could have gone a long way in addressing some of the, pressing challenges that the people of Gauteng are sitting with.
Thank you very much. Well, it sounds to me that you could be indicating that this is a failure on the part of David Makura. Do you think that he has failed, or do you think that circumstances couldn't have allowed him to do anything else?
Well, I think, looking into history, David Makura has always absolved himself of what government does. He's always said, well, my department or the Premier's office always gets a clean audit. But a clean audit means absolutely nothing if your departments that you are ultimately responsible for are failing time and time again. We have seen the departments that continue to perform dismally. I've spoken about this a little bit earlier on. Human settlement, which continue to be, in a lot of mess. We have in the Department of Health that continuously fail, to do what needs to be done. Social development as well. Let us not forget some of the things that we know have been coming even before COVID. So it cannot be that COVID will be used as an excuse for failing to deliver to the people of Gauteng. Before we even got COVID, we had the Premier that had been sitting on over a dozen of SIE reports. Why haven't we acted on those? That would have sent a very strong message that says that we are not, for corruption. We are serious about ensuring that officials are held to account. We are ensuring that those that are politically connected, or even the senior politicians within the province, if indeed they are implicated in some of these reports, then there should be action that is taken. But I'm suspecting that what happens is that these reports are then used, to wield power one way or the other politically, instead of doing what needs to be done administratively, and that is getting rid of all the rotten apples and ensuring that we're able to then focus our funds and focus our energy on delivering for the people of Gauteng. So yes, David Makura needs to take full responsibility of what has been happening. And he has been absolving himself time and time again. If you were to remember the life as it remained, he said he doesn't know. And all of a sudden, he's found dead in the middle of it. The 431 million right now that the sanitizing has gone out, or contracts that have gone out, he doesn't know. Somebody needs to be taking responsibility about it. Somebody in his office, they say it's not him, but somebody in his office had gone and given instruction of which companies are supposed to be given contracts. He doesn't know. But what has he done? Absolutely nothing. If somebody has done something in the department that is you heading as well, you're supposed to then go and find out who the person is that has given that instruction. You're supposed to then take the public into confidence and then tell the public what is it that you're going to do to ensure that you can hold, you're going to clean up and hold people to account But ultimately, he has been saying time and time again that the e-tolls have got no place here in Gauteng. Yet he's failed. When we gave him a suggestion 2 years ago to say he can actually lodge an intergovernmental dispute, where we as the province of Gauteng are saying we don't agree with what the national government is wanting to implement. And in doing that, we are going to either go and have a session with the national government where we put in this on the table, and if they don't agree, you can go to court. This is a precedent that has already been set. It has been done in the Western Cape. David Makhura has failed to do that, and that shows that he's not really capable of leading this province of ours.
Oh, thank you very much. That if you are prepared to make an example of some people, you are able then to curb. I invite any of the journalists present to raise your hand if you raise your hand, recognize it and bring you in to ask a question. But in the meantime, Solly, if I could just point out to you one thing that's coming out from the social media. There is a criticism of the DA that we're not doing anything on Jacob Zuma and Ace Makashule. You know, there's a suggestion there that being a minority in Parliament, I suppose here in the legislature, there's not much power. So what's the point? Do you think that there is anything that the DA is doing that people really ought to take note of? And do you think that the public can actually do more? And what could they do to strengthen the hand of the DA and make Parliament and the work that is done in Parliament and the legislature more effective in dealing with the ruling party that has gone out of hand?
Well, thank you very much, Mike. I think, first of all, we now need to understand that what is happening with the Zuma saga is the ANC fighting the ANC. Yes, there's corruption that needs to be responded to. There is a case that former President Jacob Zuma needs to answer to. That goes without saying. But what we're seeing happening right now, and I must remind people, there's one Batabile, what's the name? I'm forgetting the Batabile.
It's Dlamini.
Batabile Dlamini had said, and I quote, you know, you must all not forget that we all have our Smolanyana skeletons. So if Jacob Zuma goes down, we're all gonna go down. They know so much about each other and the corruption that they've all been involved in. And now what we are seeing is something that has played itself, you know, before, where the state resources are again used to fight political battles. We have seen now Ndade Begitele going to you know, to go and negotiate with Ndade Jacob Zuma. How do you have a minister going to negotiate with somebody who has actually been defiant of the laws of the country? Now that tells you that we're having a serious problem here, that the constitution will then be put on the side and asked to be taking a step back while the ANC tries to then, you know, resolve their own internal issues, and ultimately, you know, sacrificing the constitution and ensuring that they're embarrassing every, you know, law-abiding citizen of our country. What we have done, Mike, is a number of things. One is that from the DA side, we are already asking for investigation to be conducted around the Begitele's conduct. How does the Minister of Police actually get themselves involved in this kind of things? That's number one. Number two, we are also now asking that you know, the recommendations that were coming from the Zondo's commission in terms of you know, the arrest thereof be implemented. And therefore, you know, if there is a leg that that Zuma thinks that he has to stand on, let that be proven in a court of law. It cannot be that we are sending ministers, we are sending high-ranking officials of government to go and plead with Mr. Zuma to then go and appear in front of a commission. This is costing us more and more money each and every time these delays do take place. It is costing us more and more money to have Begitele going down to Nkanda to go and plead and others to go and plead. What we should be getting to is a government that is really serious about ensuring that they put their political differences and their political battle second and put what the country wants to, you know, to get first. And that is something that has been they've been failing time and time again. We've seen even with Msimanga, the case in Bloemfontein, where it's just taking forever and ever to get going. And yet when it is going, we're seeing more and more people that are bussed in, regulations not being observed there, to go and stand by Msimanga as well. And and it looks like, we're talking left and walking right here. So this is something that will continue to happen until the people of Gauteng and the people of South Africa indeed are saying enough is enough. But in the parliamentary seats, we are doing all we can to ensure that we hold these ministers and we hold government to account. We are actually in support of the recommendations that have been coming from Zondo, and this is things that we are pushing for to ensure that they get to be implemented. In Gauteng, we're doing everything that we can to ensure that David Makura and his executive can actually even be held to account. So being in opposition, it's not only about opposing, but it's also to ensure that what needs to be done is actually done as per the constitution of the country and the rules that are there in different legislatures across the country as well.
Yeah, thank you very much, Solly. And I think that, as you've indicated, there's lots of things that we've done. If we have to trawl out the record, there's many things, both in Parliament and outside of Parliament. My reminder I would give to people is that back in 2009, the National Prosecuting Authority then made the shocking decision not to prosecute Mr. Jacob Zuma. Who was it that actually pursued this right to the last? It was Helen Zille and the DA. I remember at the time, and I'm sure you will recall, that we were excoriated for having this temerity of taking on the president. Give him a chance, people would say. There's an institution called the NPA. If they've decided that there's no case, drop it. Well, we refused to do so. And now we are at last in a position where things are being exposed and more public are actually opening their eyes to what's been going on. There's books that have been written. It would not have happened but for us starting all of this in the beginning. And the other thing I would say is that when you saw in 2017, the rise of public automatically getting to the streets, calling for Jacob Zuma to be recalled, that's what prompted the ANC to back down and turn around. It was the face of a public that said, so far, but no more. And that's all that the ANC is seemingly respecting, is if the public rise up. So there's certainly, in my view, an opportunity for more and more public to support what the DA does and strengthen our hand and make sure that we actually bring the ANC to account and even get to the point where we unseat the ANC, because that's the salvation of the country. Sonny, I would ask, there's another question coming through from Facebook. You know, the municipal-owned entities, and you were in Tshwane, and there were one or two there, and there are a whole raft of these things in Johannesburg. Do you think that these things should be closed down and the services brought within the management of the council itself? What do you think is the answer?
Well, Mike, these boards, and these entities can serve quite a lot if they are channeled in the right way. We have seen, and the president is now taking, credit for what we've started in Tshwane. So if you were to look at what has happened with the Ford Motor Company as an example, the TIDA, which we decided to keep, but also change the management thereof and to clean up the boards, and so that they are not cadre-ridden, but you have the boards that will be able to then do the work that they're supposed to be doing. The boards should actually even have, some kind of performance targets that if they don't read, why are you keeping them? I mean, if you go into the private sector, it's a similar thing. You have targets that you're supposed to reach. You fail to reach those targets, you don't deserve to be there. So that's what we now need to be working towards. And you need to make sure that, the mandate is very, very clearly defined. What we have seen is that in some of the municipal entities versus the departments, there is no clear lines. The lines are sometimes blurred, and that creates a problem where A will then blame B for things not happening. B will also say it's A's responsibility for things to happen. So if you are to have the entities And you now need to make sure that the work, there needs to be very clear lines in terms of what those entities are supposed to be achieving, when they're supposed to be achieving that, and how they're supposed to be achieving that. And once you have done that, I think it will then go a long way in ensuring that you have the boards that are accountable, but B, boards that are also able to then do the job that they're supposed to be doing. So in my mind, the boards are things that can work. We have proven time and time again that they can actually work. The Western Cape has actually even proven that when you do have boards that are not, just a feeding frenzy for the cadres, they can actually deliver quite a lot. If you were to look at the Western Cape as an example, that economic entity that they've got there have done a lot. I mean, if you're now looking at your aviation space in the Western Cape, they've gone and ensure that they're able to then negotiate with your likes of the Emirates and all of that, who initially were not able to fly directly from the Western Cape, who now mean that they have more people flying into the Western Cape and actually then creating a bigger, economic resource for the people of the Western Cape through tourism and through logistics and so on and so forth, and also through the agricultural sector as well. So when you have these entities that are filled by people that are skilled, but B, people who understand what is it that they're supposed to be doing, you can have boards that will be able to then deliver and do well for the people of that province that they're serving.
Well, thank you very much. Solly, one last question. The address tomorrow, the SOPA, the State of the Province address, David Makura. Do you think he's going to make any promises? And if he does make any promises, will there be any new ones?
Well, I'll be surprised that he doesn't make any promise because he has got nothing to report on what has been done. So the best way that he will go about is to make more promises. And that's an unfortunate part. If you were to go, and this is something that we will do when we do the alternative State of the Province address, we will unpack what Makura has said ever since the time that he took over office. This is his second term, by the way. So when he started his term, when we gave him all the support, and when we said we will walk with you through this journey, and what has he done ever since? We will then look at those promises. There's been promises of new cities to be built. The private sector is doing it, despite all the challenges that the government has thrown their way, despite all the red tape that the provincial government has thrown their way. They are now doing things for themselves. They are now ensuring that they continue to move forward. And these are things that now they want to come and claim some kind of a victory over. And these are things that we're going to be unpacking. He's going to come and make promises about the jobs that are to be created while we have been losing millions of jobs. Even before the COVID-19 ever hit our shores, we have been losing, and we are not able to then recover and not even build, on getting people employed, especially young people. As I said earlier on, more than half of the youth of Gauteng find themselves unemployed. We're going to hear more, rah-rah about, the rollout of the vaccine. Yet, he's not doing anything that is talking to him, taking a proactive stance in terms of ensuring that we're able to then get much more of these vaccines into the province, other than waiting for the national government to distribute to us, which is then going to mean that we have a delayed herd immunity, here in Gauteng. We are going to hear more about the rolling out of more service stands, which we know this is something that, again, hasn't been done properly, and in many instances has actually led to chaos and had led to some of these land grabs that we've seen taking place. We're going to hear of more promises about the engagement and the negotiations that are still continuing to take place around the e-tolls. Yet at the same time, the people of Gauteng need to know that while he's telling us that Gauteng has got no space for e-tolls, at the same time, the national government has now gone and published in the Gazette the new tariffs. So we're going to hear some of the same, a whole lot of promises and very little in terms of what has actually been achieved in terms of visible improvement of people's lives. And that is unfortunately what the real state of our province is, Mike.
Well, Solly, you've given us all of the information that we needed to know, and we thank you for the time. and the opportunity that you gave for questions. We thank also for the people who viewed the Facebook broadcast today, and we thank all of the colleagues and the members of the media that submitted questions. And so until tomorrow, we'll see you again, and we'll probably see you, as indicated by Solly, at probably an alternative State of the Province address as determined by what the Premier says tomorrow. Thank you, everybody.